Nah, I need to read the transcript file first to better understand the original story's voice and pacing before writing. Let me write the new story now, based on all the analysis. The day my son threw that old suitcase out the front door and told me to take my trash and leave, I didn't cry. I just stood there on the porch, holding that worn leather handle, thinking about all the years I had spent building everything he was now throwing away with me. But before I tell you what I found inside that suitcase, let me ask you something. Have you ever had someone you love more than your own life look you in the eye and make you feel like you were nothing? Because that morning, standing on the front steps of the house I had paid for with 30 years of working double shifts at the plant, I felt exactly that. My name is Walter. I'm 67 years old. I spent my whole career as a machinist in Cincinnati, Ohio. I never missed a day of work unless I was in the hospital, and even then I showed up the morning after. I am not a man who quits. I raised 3 children on my own after my wife Dorothy passed from cancer. When our youngest, Kevin, was only 9 years old, I cooked their dinners. I went to every school play and every football game. I helped with homework at the kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night after a 10-hour shift. I did all of it without complaint because those kids were my whole world. When Kevin grew up and got married, I was proud. His wife's name is Renata. She was pretty and sharp-tongued, and Kevin looked at her like she hung the moon. I told myself that was enough. I told myself that a man who loves his wife the way Kevin loves Renata will always do right by his family. I was wrong about that. I was so wrong it cost me almost everything. It started small, the way these things always do. Renata suggested that it didn't make sense for me to be rattling around alone in a 4-bedroom house now that all the kids were gone. She said the property taxes alone were eating me alive, which was true. She said Kevin and I could spend more time together if we were under the same roof, which sounded good to me. I'd been lonely since Dorothy passed. More lonely than I ever let on to anyone. So I agreed. Kevin and Renata moved in with their 2 kids, my grandchildren Tyler and Amara, and for about 3 months it was genuinely good. I had noise in the house again. I had little feet running down the hallway. I had someone to have coffee with in the morning. I thought Dorothy would have been happy seeing the house full again. Then it shifted. Renata started making comments about the way I organized the kitchen, then about my old truck parked in the driveway, said it brought down the look of the neighborhood. Then about how I watched too much television in the evenings, said it kept Tyler up even though Tyler's room was on the other side of the house. Every week there was a new complaint wrapped in a sweet voice, and every week Kevin nodded along beside her. I told myself it was an adjustment period. I told myself Renata was just particular about her space, and since she was now living in my space, I should be patient. My older daughter Connie called me one Sunday and said, "Dad, something feels wrong. Kevin barely talks to me anymore. Every time I call him, Renata answers." I told Connie she was reading too much into it. I regret that now. About 8 months after they moved in, Renata sat me down at the kitchen table. My kitchen table that I had bought at a furniture store on Vine Street in 1987, and told me she had been thinking about the house. She had this folder with papers in it. She told me that from a financial planning standpoint, it would make more sense for the property to be transferred into Kevin's name. She used words like estate tax efficiency and probate avoidance and family trust restructuring. She had printed out articles. She made it sound like the most reasonable thing in the world. I looked at Kevin. He was looking at the table. I said I would think about it. That night, I called my oldest son, Raymond, who lives in Memphis. I told him what Renata had proposed. Raymond was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Dad, don't sign anything. I'm serious. Don't sign a single piece of paper until I get there." I told him he was overreacting. He said, "Maybe, but please just wait." I waited, and then I made the mistake of telling Renata I had spoken to Raymond about it. I don't know what changed after that conversation, but something did. She started freezing me out. Little things disappeared from my dresser. A pocket watch Dorothy gave me on our 20th anniversary. A photograph I kept from Kevin's high school graduation. When I mentioned the pocket watch to Kevin, he said he hadn't seen it. He wouldn't meet my eyes when he said it. The heat in my bedroom stopped working properly in November. When I asked about getting it looked at, Renata said the HVAC company couldn't come out until after the holidays. I slept in 3 layers for 6 weeks. By January, I felt like a stranger in my own home. Then one Tuesday morning, I came downstairs and found Renata sitting across from a man in a suit at my kitchen table. She introduced him as a financial advisor. She said they had been discussing options for the property going forward. Kevin was standing by the refrigerator drinking coffee, like this was a perfectly normal thing to happen in a man's home without his knowledge. I asked the man to leave. He looked at Renata. She gave a small nod, and he gathered his papers. After he left, Kevin finally looked at me. He said, "Dad, we're just trying to plan for the future. You're not going to be around forever." I want you to hear how that sentence landed. My son, the boy I raised alone, the boy I coached in Little League, the boy I sat with in the emergency room when he broke his arm falling out of a tree, and I held his hand and told him everything would be okay. That boy looked me in the face and said I wasn't going to be around forever like he was already filing the paperwork. I didn't say anything. I went upstairs and I sat on my bed and I looked out the window at the backyard where I used to push Kevin and his brother and sister on the tire swing I hung from the oak tree. The oak tree was still there. The tire swing was long gone. But before I tell you what happened next, I need to ask you something, and I really want to hear your answer in the comments. Have you ever had a moment where you realized the person you trusted most had been slowly, quietly, working against you the whole time? Because I am about to tell you when I realized that, and it broke something in me that took a long time to put back together. 3 weeks after the meeting with the financial advisor, I came home from my Thursday morning walk. I walk 4 miles every Thursday, have since my doctor told me to after my blood pressure scare in 2019. And I found 2 large boxes outside my bedroom door. My clothes were in them. Not all of them, just the everyday ones. My good clothes, my work boots, my winter coat, all still in the closet inside. But the boxes were there, folded shirts and pants stacked inside like I was being packed up and stored. I went downstairs. Renata was at the kitchen island on her laptop. She looked up like nothing was unusual. I said, "What are those boxes doing outside my room?" She said, "We've been thinking it might be more comfortable for everyone if you used the back bedroom. It gets better morning light." The back bedroom was where I stored old furniture. It was half the size of my room. It had a single window facing the neighbor's fence. I said, "This is my house, Renata." She smiled and said, "Of course it is, Walter. We're just trying to make things work for everyone." I went back upstairs. I moved the boxes back inside my room, and I closed the door, and I called Raymond. I told him everything. He said, "Dad, I'm buying a bus ticket tonight." I told him not to, that I could handle it. I said those words. I genuinely believed them. I should have listened to Raymond. Because 2 weeks after that, I came home from the grocery store and found the locks changed. Not just the front door, all 3 exterior doors. I knocked. I rang the bell. I could hear Tyler and Amara inside. I stood on my own front porch for 20 minutes. Kevin finally opened the door. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept. He said, "Dad, we need to talk." I said I agreed and walked toward the door, and he stepped slightly into the frame and said, "Renata thinks it would be better if you found somewhere else to stay for a while." I looked at my son for a long moment. I said, "Kevin, this is my house. My name is on the deed. My name is on every bill that comes to this address. You cannot lock me out of my own home." He said he knew that. He said he was sorry. He said Renata was upset, and he just needed me to give them some space to calm down. I was 67 years old, standing on my own front porch, being asked to leave by a man I had given everything to. I said, "Where am I supposed to go, son?" He didn't answer that. He went inside and came back with the old brown suitcase, the same one I used to take on work trips back in the 90s, with the busted zipper on the left pocket that I had fixed with a safety pin. He handed it to me. He said, "There's some of your stuff in there. We'll figure the rest out soon." Then he closed the door. I stood there holding that suitcase. My truck was still in the driveway. I got in, and I drove to the end of the street, and I pulled over, and I sat there, and I did something I had not done since the day we buried Dorothy. I cried, not politely, the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep down where you keep all the things you never say out loud. I called Connie. She answered on the second ring, and I told her what happened, and she didn't say anything for a moment, and then she said, "Dad, open the suitcase." I said it was just some of my clothes. She said, "Dad, open the suitcase." I reached into the back seat and I pulled that old brown suitcase onto my lap and I unzipped it. There were clothes on top. My blue cardigan, 2 pairs of pants, my good shoes. I lifted them out and set them on the passenger seat. Underneath was a large manila envelope sealed with my name written on it in handwriting I recognized but could not immediately place. Below the envelope was a smaller Ziploc bag, and inside the bag was a passbook, a bank passbook. I opened it. The account number was unfamiliar to me. The balance was not. $460,000. I sat in my truck on the side of Haverford Lane, and I stared at that number until my eyes blurred. Then I opened the manila envelope. Inside were 3 things: a letter, handwritten, 4 pages long, a USB drive, and a business card for a detective with the Cincinnati Police Department Financial Crimes Unit with a cell phone number written on the back, in the same handwriting as my name on the envelope. I looked at the handwriting again, and then I knew whose it was. It was Kevin's. I want you to understand what it felt like to read that letter in my truck on the side of the road on a gray February afternoon. Because the man who wrote it was not the man who had handed me a suitcase and closed the door on me 20 minutes earlier. The man who wrote it was my son, the real one. Kevin wrote that he had been watching what Renata was doing for almost a year before he understood the full extent of it. He wrote that she had, over the course of 18 months, transferred his grandmother's jewelry out of the house, forged my signature on 2 documents related to the property, opened a line of credit in my name without my knowledge, and been in communication with a real estate investor about selling the house, my house, from under me. He wrote that he had been collecting evidence quietly because he knew that if he confronted her directly, she would destroy everything and he would have nothing to show anyone. He wrote that the $460,000 in the passbook was money he had been saving for 11 years, not from any account I knew about. A separate account he had opened the year he got his first real job, money he had set aside every single month because, he wrote, "Dad, you gave us everything, and I always wanted to make sure that if anything ever happened to you, you would be okay." He had been protecting me the whole time, from his own wife. From the woman he was going to have to watch get arrested. He wrote that he was sorry for what he had done to me that day. He wrote that he needed her to believe I was gone so she would move forward with the real estate contact so the financial crimes detective could document everything in real time. He wrote that it would all be over within 72 hours and that he would call me when it was done. He wrote, "I love you, Dad. I know what you sacrificed for us. I have never forgotten a single day of it." I sat in that truck for a long time. Then I called the number on the business card. The detective answered on the first ring. He said, "Mr. Walter, we've been expecting your call. Kevin told us you'd be calling around this time. Are you somewhere safe?" I said I was. He told me to sit tight, that they were already moving, that I should not go back to the house until he called me and told me it was clear. I drove to a diner on Montgomery Road that Dorothy and I used to go to on Sunday mornings. I ordered coffee and a piece of apple pie, and I sat in the booth we always used to sit in, and I waited. The detective called me back 4 hours and 17 minutes later. He said Renata had been taken into custody. He said the charges included forgery, financial fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. He said the total estimated damage to my finances was well over $200,000. And that was before they had gone through everything on the USB drive Kevin had compiled. He said my son had been working with his office for 6 months. 6 months. When I pulled back into my driveway, Kevin was sitting on the front steps. Tyler and Amara were with Connie, who who had driven up from Dayton the moment I called her. Kevin looked like he had aged 10 years in an afternoon. He stood up when I got out of the truck. I walked up to him and I put my arms around him, and I held on, and neither of us said anything for a long time. He finally said, "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I didn't know any other way." I said, "You protected me." He said, "You spent your whole life protecting us." It was the least I could do. We went inside and I made coffee, and we sat at my kitchen table, my table, the one I bought in 1987, and Kevin told me everything from the beginning. How he had first noticed discrepancies in the household accounts. How he had found documents on Renata's laptop she didn't know he had seen. How he had gone to the police quietly and been told they needed more to build a case, and he had spent the next several months gathering it. He told me that the real estate investor Renata had been communicating with had already made an offer on the house, had already been told the deed would be available for transfer within 60 days. My house, gone in 60 days. Raymond drove up from Memphis that weekend. Connie was already there. My daughter Priscilla flew in from Atlanta. We had dinner around that table, all of us, for the first time in years. Tyler and Amara ate with us, and Amara sat next to me and leaned against my arm the way little kids do when they feel safe. And I thought about Dorothy, and about the tire swing, and about the triple shifts, and about the suitcase sitting in my bedroom upstairs, with the safety pin on the zipper. I thought about how the hardest moments of your life don't always look like what you expect. Sometimes the person handing you a suitcase on your own front porch is not abandoning you. Sometimes they are the only reason you still have anything left to stand on. Renata's case went to trial 9 months later. The judge sentenced her to 22 years. The real estate deal never closed. The house is still mine. My name is on the deed, and it will stay there. I walk 4 miles every Thursday morning. Sometimes Kevin walks with me. We don't always talk. Sometimes we just walk down Haverford Lane in the early morning quiet, and I look at the houses and the trees, and I think about how close I came to losing all of it. Not just the house, but the trust I needed to keep intact to survive the rest of my life. I keep the passbook in my dresser drawer now, not because I need to look at the number, because it reminds me that Kevin opened that account the year he got his first job, when he was 23 years old. And he put money in it every single month for 11 years because he never forgot what I gave, and he wanted to make sure I was never left with nothing. I never told you what was written in the letter at the very end, the last line after everything else. Kevin wrote, "The oak tree is still in the backyard, Dad. I never let her touch it." That tree has been there since before Kevin was born. Dorothy used to sit under it in the summer with a glass of iced tea and watch the kids play. Kevin knew what that tree meant. He had always known. If you have someone in your life who has been quietly carrying weight on your behalf without asking for credit, please tell them today. Don't wait. I almost went to my grave never knowing what my son did for me in the dark while I was sleeping, while I was too proud to ask for help. I'm Walter, and I'm glad I opened that suitcase. I have thought about that Tuesday afternoon many times since it happened, standing on my own front porch, holding a suitcase I had owned for 30 years, watching my son close the door on me. If someone had told me that morning that this would be one of the most important moments of my life, I would not have believed them. But that is the thing about the hardest moments. They rarely announce themselves as anything other than pain. What I have come to understand is that the way a person lives their life, the choices they make quietly and consistently over many years, does not disappear. It accumulates. I spent 40 years working, sacrificing, showing up, not for recognition, not because I expected anything in return, because that is what I believed a man was supposed to do for the people he loved. And somewhere along the way, without my knowledge, my son had been watching every single bit of it and taking notes. Kevin did not become the man who spent 11 years saving money for his father's protection by accident. He became that man because he grew up in a house where he saw what it looked like to put someone else first. Children absorb what they live alongside. They learn not from what you tell them, but from what you show them when no one is asking you to perform. I never sat Kevin down and gave him a speech about loyalty or sacrifice. I just lived it, imperfectly, daily, for as long as he was watching. And it turned out he was always watching. Renata made a different set of choices. She looked at an old man with a paid-off house and a simple life, and she calculated that his years and his trust made him easy to take from. She was intelligent. She was patient. She was organized. But she applied all of that intelligence in the direction of taking rather than building, and the entire structure she constructed came down not because of some dramatic intervention, but because the person closest to her had quietly, methodically documented every piece of it. The very patience she used against me was used against her by someone who learned patience from watching me survive. That is not luck. That is cause and effect, playing out over years. I think about the men and women who find themselves in the position I was in, trusting the wrong person, losing ground slowly, not realizing how much has been taken until almost everything is gone. The hardest part is not the betrayal itself. The hardest part is the self-doubt that comes with it, the voice that asks how you missed it, how you let it happen, what that says about your judgment. I sat with that voice for a long time. What I eventually came to understand is that the capacity to trust is not a weakness. It is what allowed me to raise children who knew what trust was worth. The person who exploited it was the one with the deficit, not me. What protects you in this life is not cynicism. It is not building walls so high that no one can reach you. What protects you is doing the right thing long enough and consistently enough that the people who matter most absorb it and carry it forward. Kevin protected me because I had, without knowing it, taught him exactly how. That is the only inheritance that cannot be forged, stolen, or transferred out of your name. I'm Walter, and I still walk 4 miles every Thursday morning.